the Manhattan Beach Art Center. I'm Cultural Arts Supervisor Eric Brinkman, and I'm joined here with artist Simon Ouwerkerk and guest curator Homeira Goldstein. Today we're here to present to you Simon Ouwerkerk's solo show, Form and Movement. We're going to be walking through the gallery today, and we're going to be interviewing Simon and asking him a few questions about his work. Before that, I'd like to turn it over to Homeira to explain a little bit about her relationship with the city.
Hello everyone, I'm Homeira Goldstein, Chairman of the Board of TIME4ART, a privately funded nonprofit art organization in Manhattan Beach with the mission of bringing art to the community. We have had a long relationship with the city. First of all, I was on the Cultural Art Commission, and then when the city acquired this building, I was involved with turning it into its present format, a cultural arts center. And since 2001, we have been doing a spring show and a fall show, 2 exhibitions a year. And this is our 32nd show here, which is called Form and Movement. And I want to thank so much Eric, Aylin, and the entire City Council, City Cultural Art Commission, and we have just had a wonderful relationship working together. Simon, I've known you for a long time, since you were in college, and your work has changed somewhat, and we know that you do 2 different kinds of work, your own work, and you also do some commission work. Tell me about what comes to your mind when you start creating your work.
When I first start creating my work, I might have a general idea of how it's going to look in the future, but I typically start spontaneously with fragments of metal. I start welding them together to create a volume, and then as I go, I try to see where that volume is directing me to, and so I have a tendency to create forms that simulate rocks or the human body. So as I'm going, I have those things in my mind, and so sometimes they start looking like a figure, and if that's the case, I kind of push it towards that direction, and if it looks too much like a representation of a figure, I kind of change it a little bit so it becomes more abstract.
But do you have any preconceived ideas? Like when you get up that day and you say, I'm going to make a piece of art today, do you have any sense of what direction you're going? Or if you want to make a large piece, small piece, as you said, more abstract, more figurative, where do you start? What is that point of inception?
First I start with whether I want to make a freestanding sculpture or a wall-mounted sculpture. So in that case, I would decide, for example, I want to make a series of small wall-mounted sculptures. So that directs me to working on basically one side and keeping the other side flat, and then forming my volume from
so that gives you some
edges,
direction.
Right, from the edges, from where it would mount on the wall, I'd start forming and then close the shape.
This is one of my favorite pieces, and I love the stamps on it. All it says is me, me, me. So, Simon, would you talk about this piece?
So this piece obviously has a very figurative look to it. And
it does.
I started off with the lower part, and that itself looks like a small figure, and that was going to be the end of the sculpture. It was just going to be this form up to here, a finished piece, but somehow it seemed like it just needed more. So it ballooned out into this upper figurative form, and I like the process of using all these fragments, small pieces. They're like the building blocks of any kind of structure. Like you could take bricks and stack them up, and eventually you could have a whole castle.
Do you cut the pieces to the shapes you want, or there are remnants or
They
scraps?
start off as remnants. I'm just using the shapes I find and put them together, but eventually I come to a point where I have to fit in pieces, so then I start cutting out those shapes. And I first, with this
So part
piece,
of it, your work is guided by the shape of the pieces.
exactly. And then I, like with these volumetric forms, I would take the pieces, hammer them first into these curved shapes, and then attach them, which is a much more easier process than, even though it's much more time consuming than taking a whole single sheet and trying to hammer it into just
Shape,
large, continuous volumes, which would be very difficult to do to get these kinds of more globular shapes. And then I also like the lines it creates each
A lot of texture, yes.
And then to me, it's like kind of the narcissistic aspect of sculpture and putting myself into the work. This is me, this is what I do. It's my artwork.
These
So
are all wall
these are-
sculptures.
These are all individual pieces, and I never thought of having them together in one group like this.
But
were
don't they
all-
look nice?
Yes. And thanks to you, you gave me a whole different idea of displaying the work. So before, each work would be just shown independently.
Individually. Well, that's the collective that brings the different shapes together very nicely. Being an artist, I'm sure you have been influenced by other artists. So I know in our conversations you have talked a lot about Franz West and also Frank Stella, which was somewhat inspiration to you in your earlier work. Would you talk about that?
Sure. Early in my art career, I would look at Frank Stella's work. I liked how he was able to cram so much visual experience into his sculptures and yet not make it look like a mess. So I started trying to do that same kind of thing. That I was kind of influenced by that and started creating sculptures that had a lot of pieces together, and I would add paint to it, drip paint on it, and create very visually dynamic and visually full works. But for some reason, for me, they came more across as paintings that became three-dimensional. And I wanted to make something that read more as like true sculpture with volumes. And I had seen Franz West work, seen a piece in Beverly Hills, and then other large pieces elsewhere, and they looked like metal pieces. I think they were all made out of aluminum. And you could clearly see, even though they were painted, you could clearly see that they're all pieces welded together that created these big, massive volumes. And then I started visualizing what they would look like if they weren't painted, and that kind of influenced the direction that I'm going in now.
Now, this is one of your more airy pieces, and you were not commissioned to do this, so could you tell me about it?
Yeah, so the overall volume is kind of typical of what I like to do, kind of looks like a rock, but instead of using flat sheets, I took...
Are these tubes or flat sheets?
No, these are tubes.
Yeah.
So I took the edges of the sheets, like what you see in the other work, how you see the lines and the wells, and I thought I could make a work based on just that aspect, the linear aspect. So I created using tube stainless and then forming stainless, this more
Because
linear.
some areas the tube is in exact tube form, and then in other places it's totally welded and has gone out of shape.
That's to create more of a like a dynamic visual experience, going
Mhm.
from art organic
To
to more linear, architectural, and then back to kind of a more organic shape. And the overall shape is an organic shape. And then, like I said, it's if I took the linear parts of my volumetric sculptures and then use that concept to create the form. So this is like the edges of the sheets where they're welded together, except made into a sculpture itself.
Mhm. In addition to the work that you do on your own as an artist, you also do commission work, which I know is very difficult because you would like to maintain your sense of creativity, and the artwork is still part of your creation, and also at the same time you've got to work with your client to bring whatever their idea is into reality. So tell me about that process.
All right, like
How do you approach it?
Well, my organic freeform work, of course, has a different approach to it. It's something I don't know what it's going to look like in the end, and so that when it comes to commission work, a lot of people want to know what the work is going to look like. So that causes me,
Or almost how it's
Right.
going to look like.
so that causes me to have to make sketches, and then I would show the client those sketches, and then they would pick one that they like.
So the client gives you the idea, but it still is
Well-
they give you maybe some direction, but it still is your creation, is your drawings, is.
Well, I control the direction because, you know, I can only do what I like to do. So
Right.
what I would do is create a series of drawings, and then there's always going to be one that they gravitate towards, and then details might have to be fleshed out in the drawing they pick, and then once I get that, once the specific drawing they like is done, then I go to a scale drawing. It'd be basically like an architectural plan. And then sometimes from that, I'll even go to a model, and then you could see three-dimensional exactly how it's going to look. And in many cases, I'll just go straight from the drawing to the finished artwork. But during the whole process, I could see and the client could see how it's going to look.
Simon, the fascinating question that I always like to ask you, and I always do, is that when do you know your work is done? When do you stop working on a piece?
It's hard to say, but I keep working. Like I said before, as I work, it becomes more and more controlled. And then when that control reaches a maximum point and I'm satisfied with how it looks, or simply when the final volume is closed, then I feel that it's finished. But I've had other works where I thought they were finished, and then I went back to them and changed them, and they became something different, but then more finished.